Check 1 2. Check.
Why would you think
Check
that?
check.
Huh?
Check check.
Where would that,
Check check.
Where'd that come from? Put it back. There, you should put my bucket. There it is.
Check check check. Check 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 check.
What's up, you guys? What?
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So, welcome to STEM Night, everyone. My name is Brett Boney. I'm the president of Central Robotics. Before we get started, I just want to say a couple of thank yous and then introduce our vice presidents. So first of all, I want to thank all of our panelists for coming out today. This is a really special event, and we wouldn't be able to have it without them. All of them are like experts in their field, and we're really excited to hear from all of them. And so let's just start with a big round of applause for all of them. Next, I want to thank our sponsors. So, once again, without them, we wouldn't be able to have these events. First, I want to thank Foundation for SBS, Buff Studio, the Mandava family, Bassam Hadi, Maddox New Crater, Swan Derm, and Ghost Energy. Once again, without these people, or without this fundraising, we would not be able to host these cool events. And we wouldn't be able to have two successful teams. So now I'm just going to hand over the mic to Will and Jonah, our vice presidents.
Hi guys, my name is Jonah Swan. So we've got two teams, as I'm sure many of you know. I run one of our teams, which is Team Sigma. Really thankful that you guys are all here and that you guys are all ready to learn from our awesome STEM professionals. It's going to be a great night. I'm going to make an announcement later today about another outreach event that we have coming up. And with that, I don't have a lot else to say. I'll hand it off to Will.
Hi, so I'm Will. I am the team lead for CPU. My team is the one that organized this event tonight. So kind of how the night will look, we'll start off, all of our panelists will go ahead and give their presentations. Then we've been sent in some Q&A questions. So we'll start with asking those, and then we'll open it up to the audience for any of you to ask questions you have. So our first panelist is Dr. Michael McCoy. He is a biomedical engineer who graduated from Central High School. He currently works at the Takeda Pharmaceuticals developing gene therapies. He is zooming, so we may have some technical difficulties. Some trouble getting the audio connected.
Check. While they're getting that figured out, I can go ahead and make an announcement about an outreach event that we're doing later on. So my team, Team Sigma, and I mean Central Robotics as a whole is helping put all of this together. But one thing that we're doing is we're actually hosting a 5K event. So April 1st, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., we are hoping to see all of you guys out there. That'd be absolutely awesome. It's going to be at Hickory Hills, and it's going to be a fun event. And then I'm sure a lot of you know a lot about Central Robotics right now, but I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about kind of what our two teams are, ultimately what the reason is for why we're putting this event together and why it's important to us. So part of the competitive side of what we do, obviously, is not just creating competitive robots. Also, we are graded on our ability to put together successful outreach in 3 categories. That's community, peer, and youth outreach. And so really a big mission and goal behind what we do at Central Robotics is raising awareness for STEM. I know for me, whenever I joined this club, it was not something that was really on my radar. I wanted to do business. That's still something that I want to do in college, but STEM and engineering definitely was not on my radar. And so when I joined freshman year, I really had no idea.
Test. Good.
Thanks, guys.
No problem. As long as everyone can hear me clearly. Okay. All right, sorry, good to go? Okay, sorry. I can't really hear anyone, so let me know if there are any questions or anything that come up when speaking. Hello everyone, my name is Michael McCoy. I am a graduate of Fitman High School. I graduated back in 2008, and I think it'd be just best if I just went through kind of like academic career, what I'm doing now. This is what you guys are probably most interested in. So I graduated from 2008, I was an IB student. Then I went straight to University of Missouri Columbia, where I majored in biological engineering. And I was there from 2008 to 2012. And in 2012, I graduated and began grad school the following fall, immediately at Cornell University. So started my PhD immediately in biomedical engineering. And while at Cornell, I mainly focused on what we call soft tissue engineering. So we're engineering things like skin or cartilage, or a lot of, what I focused on was a lot of cardiovascular tissues, like blood vessels. I basically growing blood vessels in petri dishes for a lot of my work. And you guys aren't aware, PhDs should last between 5 to 6 years, sometimes longer it takes it. And then so it took about 6 years. And so in 2018, I graduated my PhD in biomedical engineering. And from there, I did what's called a postdoc. And so if you aren't familiar with a postdoc's sort of like, how you may have a residency if you're a physician or a veterinarian. A postdoc is essentially sort of like a residency for PhDs. We do additional training. And I did a postdoc at Harvard in cardiovascular medicine, where I focused on gene therapies and RNA biology. Now, this is really topical. Some of you have heard of a lot of the COVID vaccines that came out with RNA technologies, and a lot of that was pioneered in the area right now. And let's see, I finished my postdoc in 2022, so just last year, and then from there I left academia and I went straight into industry, into Cara Pharmaceuticals, where I focused in helping to evaluate and develop gene therapies for rare diseases, with a primary focus on hemophilia and some rare neurological diseases. But we focus on viral and what we call viral and non-viral therapies, and I sort of do a lot of the engineering work in that end. Yeah, that's basically everything I do now. So, if anyone has any questions or anything, let me know. At the end, that's totally fine. Yeah, no problem. Good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for standing by. So our next panelist is Eric Blaha. He is an engineer at SRC here at Springfield. He works with clients to promote a circular supply chain by taking discarded parts and rebuilding and testing them to bring them to a higher standard for reuse. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to him.
Product development for Reman. So I'll kind of walk you through my history, why you should pay attention to me. what we do, what is remanufacturing, kind of some of the engineering disciplines, because that's a bit weird. And then I went ahead and answered some of the questions we got already, so try and keep it pretty brief. My background, microelectronic design and electrical engineering about 20 years ago. So that means everything I know now doesn't apply anymore, which is great. So, grad degree is in business from Florida, and then I've spent time over that past 20 years at a bunch of different companies, Siemens, Atlas Copco, Michelin, Bass Pro Shops, and then my past 5 years have been at SRC companies, focusing in on remanufacturing. So you guys are like, well, what's remanufacturing? Why should we care about it? So remanufacturing is kind of the original green industry. So Springfield's a hub for this, and it started about 30 or actually 40 years ago. And what it is it's taking discarded parts that you would normally spend a lot of time mining, casting a new engine, making a new PCB board, and then you fix them. You bring it up to OEM standard, then you sell them. And then you can do that again and again and again. So now you don't have to pull these parts out of the earth anymore. You can just keep that part going and going and going. And it turns out it's a really profitable industry. That's what SRC is all about. We're one of the largest employers in town. And it makes it pretty nice to actually have a hub of green industry here in Springfield. So in electronics, we get to do a lot more cool stuff with this. So we'll take ECU from a car or an EV battery, and then we'll figure out a way to replace any of the parts that are broken, damaged, and then fix that, sell that back into that supply chain to that original supplier, so they don't have to go buy and make a new battery. So it's a pretty cool system, and it's pretty technical intensive. So a lot of robotics, a lot of programming, a lot of PCB design, a lot of electronics capability in there. So that's a pretty specific engineering subset, right? So what do the rest of the engineers do? We already heard from a biomedical engineer. They get to do cool stuff with, designing things that go inside a body. It's really complicated, kind of squishy, gets a little weird with that. You got nuclear engineering, which is how do you make power plants go, and things that go boom. Mechanical engineering, screwdrivers, mechanical devices, probably more complicated, don't know. Chemical engineering, also things that go boom, chemicals, molecular interaction, food additives. Civil engineering, how do you build things? Electrical engineering, things that can shock you, programming things, widely regarded the best engineering, in my own opinion. And then everything else, that's the kind of cool thing about engineering. If you make it, you can do it. It doesn't need to be anything outside of that. You can make it up in ag, you can do it in robotics, you can do it in things that haven't even been invented yet. It's just that science of building something and then making the practical application for it. In engineering, you often have subsets. You get a degree in engineering, you will have a specialty in that engineering. For electrical engineering, you got quite a few different ones. Biomedical, how do you implant devices that rely on circuitry inside the human body? Mind-brain interfaces, that sort of thing. Integrated circuits, PCB fab. A lot of that will be based in AI development within those systems, because we're designing transistors at a capacity of billions or trillions on a trip. Communication, wireless devices, computer engineering, firmware. How do you make a computer code talk to the hardware? Robotics and controls, motors and electromagnetics, microelectronic design, so photovoltaics, microelectronic motor systems. How do you design something very small? Signal processing, pure math, financial engineering, and then computational science. Some of the questions that we got earlier, if it'll go. Okay. Only got one more slide, so that makes this easy. Questions within the engineering field. They kind of seeded us with some of these. So, how much does it pay? It's pretty good living. It's a comfortable wage. You'll start at about 50 out of school. goes up from there. It's not going to make the most money. If you want to make the most money, if that's your metric, that's fine. Go into finance. If you're going to be a mercenary, go all in. Education, you don't necessarily need a college degree to be an engineer. You can be a tech. It might take 10 years to get to that same point where college would have gotten you, but you could do it. You just have to have that strong technical aptitude, ability, that passion to go focus in on something and make a career out of it, and have the discipline to do that for a long time. Is college debt worth it? Maybe. It speeds up your process. There's always an ROI in that equation, but it generally will shave 7 to 10 years off of it. Most employers pay for a degree, so I know at SRC that's a big thing that we focus in on. You work for us for a few years, we'll gladly go pay for a degree that's useful to the company. I always let someone else pay for something that's useful for you. And then when you're looking at schools and education, schools is just a means to an end. Pick a school that'll develop your passion for what you want. Also make sure it's in the area you want to go to. Springfield might not be the best for aerospace engineering. Maybe try Washington. Michigan for automotive, that sort of thing. That actually is pretty critical. And then never sell yourself short. Find something you do, make sure you're passionate about it. Everyone is an expert at something. Most of the time someone's willing to pay for it if you can figure out a way for that to be useful. So that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. So our next panelist, I'll use this one. Our next panelist is Dr. Laszlo Kovacs. So he works at Missouri State and divides his time between teaching genetics and the biology department conducting research about plants adapting to environmental stressors. He works with undergrad students and in collaborations with other scientists at U.S. universities. So we'll go ahead and hand it off to him.
Thank you for the introduction and the kind invitation. And it's really great to see so many high school students here interested in science, technology, and engineering and mathematics. It's really great. So, as Will said, the clicker.
Yeah. It's upside down.
Okay. Still on.
It's working up here. This is a separate. So just click it up there.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you. All right, so this is my webpage, the opening page at Missouri State University. I'm a professor of biology, and as Will said, I teach genetics and I do research in plant genetics. As you can see, I work with a bunch of students. This is my research group, and it's a very diverse group. So of course, constantly changing as students come into the lab and students graduate. But we have graduate students here and undergraduates also. Okay, so the instructions that I have to talk a little bit about the description of what it means to be a professor. So I actually read the instructions and I try to adhere to them. So what professors do, professors are scientists or engineers. You can be a professor in many different fields. You can be a professor in humanities, in economics, but most professors are scientists or scholars in their field, right? So I teach in the sciences, I teach biology, and so in order to become a professor, you have to have an academic position, right? So you're working at a college or at a university. If you work at a college, you probably don't have to do much research, but if you work at a university, you are required to not only teach, but also do research, right? So you might ask, so why would not just be people who teach, and why would just not be people who do research at a university? Wouldn't it be nice to have a division of labor? Well, the reason why professors are doing research is This way, we have to be really on the top of our fields, right? So if I teach, I don't just teach what I learned 30 years ago, right? And Eric said what we learned 20 years ago or even 10 years ago is not very useful anymore, especially in sciences and engineering where the field is progressing very, very fast. So we have to be on top of our field, abreast of the newest technology and research in order to get funding, right? Because universities, so this might surprise you, universities do not support funding. Universities actually make research. Universities do not support research. They make research possible. They provide space, they provide a building, but in order for us to get funding for research, we actually have to write proposals, grant proposals. So there are many different agencies that support that. You can write it for the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. If you work with plants or animals, you can write it for National Science Foundation. But you can write small grants too, and you can get small funding, local funding, for example, for water resources of Springfield and so on and so forth. So you have to bring in the funding. And so these are two major components of being a professor, teaching and research. And of course there is service. At university there's always service. What does service mean? First of all, a university should be self-governed. The faculty should have some self-governance, and so we have to serve committees, make decisions. For example, at my department in biology, we hire people collectively as a faculty. We make the decision who is hired, and we make the decision who gets tenure. Tenure is when someone works as an assistant professor for the first 5 years, and then we evaluate his work or her work and see if she qualifies to be a member of the full-fledged member of the department and becomes associate professor. So that's, and a lot of different things that we essentially govern the university. Shared governance is the idea of the university, how the universities are run. And of course, we have public service, right? So public service means many different things. I work with the industry, for example, agricultural companies, if they need some advice. This is a public service. We talk to high schoolers, we talk to general audience about science, why locally what we have here is so important, for plan reading and so on and so forth. So these are the three major components. Now, usually professors are specializing in very narrow fields. So I am a biologist, but I am focusing on genetics because biology is an enormously large field. That doesn't mean that I cannot teach, for example, general biology. I can, but I have to be really deeply involved in the area of genetics and molecular biology, especially of plants, because that's what I work with. So professors, you probably know, they have an extremely heavy workload. We don't have working hours, we have position. And so being, doing all those things, you can ask my daughter Anya, she doesn't see me very much sometimes because even when I'm at home, I'm working during the weekends a lot of times. Now, despite of that, professors have the highest job satisfaction, much higher than most other professions. So why is that? Well, exactly because of your intellectual involvement. So when you're a professor, first of all, you have to have education. So there's no choice. You have to go to college. And then when you get a college degree, then you get a master's after that. That's an extra 2 years on top of the college. And then you go to get a doctoral degree. Now you can abbreviate that and you can just do a doctoral. I, for example, went to University of Missouri, just like the first speaker, in Columbia, and I just got a doctoral degree right after I got my bachelor. I got a bachelor in a different country, and then I just got a doctorate right after that. So you can abbreviate that, but still, depending on your field, at minimum 3 years, but usually it's 4 or 5. If you're a biochemist, it could be like 6 years to get a doctorate. And then you still cannot get a job right away a lot of times because there's so many PhDs are trained, but there's a huge market. It's shopping. It's the market of the buyers, right? It's the buyer's market to hire people. There's so many PhDs. So a lot of times, after you get your doctorate, you go and work at a lab somewhere at a university, possibly a different university where you graduated from. So you gain experience. Okay, and so you can be lucky. We just hired someone, for example, in biology who just got her doctorate, and she is an assistant professor. But that rarely happens. Usually people do 1 or 2 postdocs. So a lot of preparation, right? A lot of preparation. Now, one of the questions that were forwarded to me is about, is it worth it? Is it worth it to put all this effort and all this investment into it? Well, I think it's worth it, and I talk about it, what makes this line of work so interesting and so fulfilling. But financially, it also, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so financially, actually, this is probably the easiest way to get a high degree in the sciences, this academic track, because you really don't have to go to a really fancy university to get a good education. You can come to some place that is affordable. You can come to Missouri State, and you can really learn a lot there, especially the sciences, but also in other areas. Because it doesn't really matter where you study genetics, right, or where you study biochemistry. The laws of nature are the same everywhere. They teach the same thing at MIT. Maybe they teach it better. Actually, they might not, because MIT professors are so heavily involved in research, they really don't have time to teach undergrads. So the best minds actually are not in the class. So anyway, and then when you're a graduate student, you actually get paid, so you don't have to pay for that. It's not like a professional school. If you go to dental school or if you go to pharmacy school, it costs a lot of money. But here, you actually get a stipend in your research that you do for your master's thesis or your doctoral degree. Your doctoral dissertation actually is something that you get paid for, okay? And not a fancy living, but it's the way to get a really good education, essentially free. And then postdoctoral training. When you're a postdoc, you get a much better salary at that point. And then, of course, you won't get rich here. Like Eric said, this is not a field to get rich. You get a good living wage, a comfortable living, but you don't become a professor to be rich. Okay, so how is my day? That was one of the questions that you will ask me. So I usually teach either a lecture or a lab. There's a genetics lab or a genetics lecture. Lectures are huge. A lot of times over 100 students are in there. Labs are small, hands-on. On average, I have one a day, either a lecture or a lab. And it's sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, depending on the schedule. The rest of the time, I'm working with students in lab experiments. Right? So I am supervising their work, especially if they're graduate students. So graduate students need a lot of supervision, of course, because they don't just do any research, they do research for their thesis, and we want to make sure they get enough data that they can graduate and publish something. But we also have field experiments, right? So if you are a zoologist or work with plants, you go around and you do a lot of different things during the day. Now we also have advisement. What does advisement mean? We don't just advise our graduate students, we also advise undergrads. So undergrads come to us first 2 or 3 years of their studies to make sure, we make sure that the courses that they take will get them to their degree in 4 years. They don't go around and take things that are not getting them closer to graduation. And of course, we spend a lot of time writing research proposals and writing publications. Intellectually really engaging, right? You always have to read the most recent literature. I work with just brilliant people, my colleagues around the country, and so it's really a dynamic, excellent work. Now, many people, when they start an academic career, they just want to do research, and that's how I was, and that's how pretty much everyone is. But teaching actually is such a fulfilling job, because I teach young people, and some of them get really inspired. Now, not all of them, so some of them not make you happy, but there's always some people who are really into it, and their eyes open up, and the world opens up for them. Okay, and so if you are a professor, you always, no matter in which area you work, you're serving the public good. It's not for profit. You know what you are doing is to help the community, to help humanity essentially. And you can work in very, very basic science questions. Eventually, any scientific discovery will be applicable, will be used, it can be translated into benefit. All right. So what's my research focus? Just a little bit of what I'm doing. So I'm working on plant genetics, and plant genetics, breeding plants, or identifying genes that would make plants resilient for the harsh climate. And where is that harsh climate? If you haven't watched the news, you probably haven't seen it. So in our area, not so much, but if you watch news, what's happening in California, both in the summer and in the winter, you see that climate change is a reality. And so we are working actually with wild plants. I'm working with grapevine, which is an excellent model species. So grapevine, I'm working with wild plants essentially. These are the ones that grow in really odd places, right? So this bush actually is a grapevine, this shrub here. And as you can see, it's growing on a gravel bar by the river. And these rivers just dry out in the summer, and there's no water anywhere. And these plants survive. Now this trait, that this plant can survive, is an extremely important trait in the world in which we are heading now. Because there will be just times when there will be areas that will be extremely dry. So we have to figure out what are those genes that enable this plant, this wild, useless plant to survive. So it's not that useless. These are genetic resources that we have to maintain. They are here in the Ozark. So we have to figure out how to transfer this trait to the trait in California, where it's less and less water in the summer for agriculture. So what we do is we extract the DNA of the plants, study the DNA, we make different crosses, and we map the genes so we can identify where these traits are encoded, where the survival of the plant in the drought is encoded. So we make these plants, this is 19 chromosomes that we find, and we have markers in there, and then we can map, for example, this is enlarged chromosome 10, and this is, we identify the region which happens to be providing resistance against the serious pathogen. But that's how we identify rooting structures, drought tolerance, and all things. So one of the greatest things about my job specifically is that I get out of the lab, I get out of the building. I'm not just in my office all the time. And as we are exploring the wild plants here in the Ozarks, it took me just the most beautiful places in this world. You have no idea how beautiful this state is until you go into nature and see it, right? So we are collecting these wild plants, and oops, is there a way to click on this? That doesn't help. Yeah, I just had a little video of we're collecting them in nature, but that's okay. Just 30 seconds. Are we good?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Kobach. So our next presenter is Maddie Mickle. She's a former Central Robotics member. So she graduated last year. She's a freshman at MSU and is majoring in mechanical engineering. She is the vice president of the Women in STEM Club there and helps manage communications and plans events for her club. So I'll go ahead and pass it off to her.
Alright, hello. Can you hear me alright? So, how many of you guys are seniors or juniors? Like a raise of hands. Alright, a good amount of people. So, I'm going to be talking about STEM in college, and as I said before, my name is Maddie Mickle. I am from Women in STEM. I'm their vice president. This is actually our first event that we're doing this year, so I'm very happy that I could work with the robotics team on this for our first project. And pretty much, as I said before, I did graduate here from Central 2022. And yeah, let's get into it. So at Missouri State, we have a wonderful opportunity where people can, if they are interested in STEM-related fields such as engineering, physics, mathematics, computer science, cybersecurity, any of that stuff, that they can co-op with Rolla S&T and be able to get a degree from them for a much cheaper price, and also they can stay in their hometown, Missouri, where there is a lot more job opportunities than there are in Rolla, and you still get the same experience as kids do from Rolla S&T as well. So, also at Missouri State, there are a couple of different programs, organizations that a lot of people work really closely together in. And so we have a bunch of organizations from electrical engineering, i.e. EEE. We have people who also work with Save Formula. They develop basically race cars, created from scratch, which doesn't that sound fun? And then we also have more like business, tech savvy organizations such as Bears in Tech as well there. I'm also part of a program called LS AMP. This is a really cool program where not only you guys can do, have a community that you can work with, but also it is a group where they do a lot of research and development. And I'm currently going to be going to a conference in Washington, D.C. in February, all for free, and it is on science, environmental science. So, right, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maddie. So our next panelist is Dr. Sharad Bansal. He's a cardiologist at Mercy Heart Clinics and Hospital. He went to med school at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences program, did his residency at Southern Illinois, and had a fellowship at UMKC. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to him.
Good evening. Thanks for the invitation. It's good to be here. So, like Will said, I'm a cardiologist here at Mercy, and I work in both the inpatient and the outpatient setting here at the hospital and the clinic. And as the title suggests, we take care of patients who have either known or suspected heart disease, cardiovascular disease, and we are looking at both treatment and prevention of heart disease as well as risk factors that lead to development of those conditions. It's a very challenging and interesting field, and obviously very fulfilling. We get to take care of patients over their lifetime and also work with a team over a long time. So you tend to develop long-term relationships as well, professionally as well. Just a little bit about my background in education. That's one of the things I was asked to present. I did my schooling and medical school back in India, and after that I took the USMLE Step 1 and 2, which is a requisite for residency training. And then I came here and I did my residency in internal medicine at SIU. And then I took my USMLE Step 3, which is a requisite for further training and practicing. And then I did my 3-year cardiology fellowship at UMKC in Kansas City before I came to Springfield in 2001. So this has been my first and only job since 2001. The road to becoming a doctor can be long. It can take anywhere from 7 to 15 years depending on which path you take and what specialty you end up practicing. These are some of the resources to reference and go to if you have interest in looking up some resources as well. So before you start medical school, you have to take some prerequisite courses, and you have to take the MCAT. That's a requisite for applying for medical school. Once you complete those and you apply to medical schools, they have their own process of selection, and they have their own unique way of selecting students based on not just the MCAT scores, but also your background, your other interests, your academics, your experiences and your interest and where you're from. So it's a fairly holistic process of selection and not just based on any one score in getting selected for the medical school. It remains fairly competitive, as you know. The demand has been very high, and it remains very competitive to apply for a medical school. Now, the medical school is 4 years. It's a fairly rigorous coursework, fairly varied. Each school has its own curriculum, of course, but it involves a combination of didactic classroom. There is obviously clinical experiences. It covers obviously science, basic science, covers basic history taking, problem solving, and they always involve some medical ethics as well. So that's a 4-year kind of core training for the medical school. Now, most medical schools do include some research in their training. There is a separate track for anybody who's interested in research to do what we call an MD PhD program. So there are several schools in the country that offer a combined MD PhD program as well, which is a longer track. Now, after medical school, you know, most students apply for residency training, and this is where you choose the field in medicine that you want to further train and eventually practice. So based on your interest, you would apply to the MASH program, and there's a wide variety of choices. There are more than 120 options to choose from. And then you apply to what we call the National Resident Matching Program, which is a kind of a national program that everybody applies in terms of your preference of where you want to do your further training and which specialty, and then the programs select students based on their preference. So this is the process for getting into residency programs after the medical school. Now, the residency training itself can be from 3 to 7 years, depending on which specialty you chose. You know, they're all varied, and in the training program, this is where you get more of the hands-on experience. That's where you work with a team to do clinical work, and you work under the supervision of attending physicians. These are at different settings. It could be an inner-city setting, it could be a private hospital, it could be a medical school hospital, it could be the VA. So depending on the program, you may work in one or more settings. And again, this is a hands-on training along with didactics and research. After residency training, some people may choose to do a fellowship training as well, which is further subspecialization within that area. So that is another 1 to 3 years after residency training. So there are a lot of different paths to take depending on obviously whether you choose primary care, whether you choose a surgical field, whether you go into some medical specialties. Now, just typical day, at least for me, just to give you an idea, and it varies obviously based on your specialty, but starts early in the morning, around 7. A lot of physicians will spend at least half a day in the clinic, in the outpatient setting, seeing patients. I spend the other half in the hospital setting. You see patients from the emergency department and admitted patients, where you see patients and perform procedures. The typical set of things you do for most patients that you assess will be obviously history taking, physical examination. You would review all the data they already have. We all have electronic records now for these patients. You would order some tests and procedures. You may perform some of them. You may refer these patients for other testing and invasive procedures and surgeries. And then obviously medications and treatments and so forth. So typical day, ends, between 5 and 6. Most physicians have to take some calls. So for us, it's typically once a week, overnight call, and you have to work some weekends. For me, it's like 1 weekend a month, and that varies obviously based on your specialty and where you are and the size of your group. So there's also some vacation CME time for most physicians. For us, it's 6 weeks, a year. Some places have more than that, 10 to 12 as well. So that varies depending on, again, where you are, but there is some dedicated CME and vacation time as well. So I think the question for you guys is that for me, is this something that I want to pursue? And obviously, you don't really want to waste your time if that's not something you want to do in the long run. As you saw, the training is very long and expensive. So you want to be sure that this is what you have passion for and this is what you want to do as a long-term profession. And that's where you choose your path early on and dedicate all the time. So like any other profession, we've heard some of the professions, there are pros and cons, and this is no exception. Some of the pros are, this is not just a job. You do really get to help people. You take care of sick patients, so you do get to help people. You are able to work in areas of need, and you do have, it does have a position in society. It's a respected field profession. There are a lot of job opportunities, so there's a huge demand for all kinds of providers in the medical field, including physicians. You can take all sorts of different career paths. So the choice is limitless. You can go into many different areas within medicine. So that's interesting, and you don't know what you would like till you really get into it. So it allows you that option that you can choose what you enjoy once you enter the field. It does pay well. It's monetary benefit, so it does have that benefit. Now the cons are, it is a very long training, 7 to 15 years. It's expensive. Even after you finish your training, you need to continue with keeping up and continue with education. The working hours can be long. It does require a lot of responsibility and discipline. There is stress and burnout if you overdo it. And there are medical legal risks. This is an area that's something that you have to contend with, and that's part of the profession. So you have to kind of weigh the pros and the cons as you are trying to decide if this is for you to pursue. So just a couple of pointers. The demand is very robust. The population is aging. The population is living longer. We have better treatment. So the demand goes up as the population grows and they live longer. They need more physicians. There is more need for research, more public health needs as well. There are newer technologies that are coming up every day that allow us to do more for the patients. So what we have today, we didn't have 10 years ago. So it's always an exciting, dynamic field and allows you to excel in certain areas because there's always something new coming up. There has been a trend that the healthcare is shifting from more of an outpatient setting from the hospital setting. Traditionally, it used to be all hospital-based. So it's moving to more of a outpatient ambulatory and clinic setting. And more physicians are going into a static position as well. So that may impact your lifestyle. It's a better lifestyle, but it also may affect the monetary aspects of the job in the future. There are more opportunities if you are willing to work in inner cities or not necessarily want to go to a big metro area. But there are opportunities everywhere across the country. So the three different areas, I won't go through that slide, but you could work primarily at the hospital. There are many specialties that work primarily at the hospital. You could work in the community, primarily in primary care, or you could do research, go into academia, do teaching and training. So those are the three different paths you can take within medicine. This is just a list of the different specialties that you could choose. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but some of the common ones. Obviously primary care, you can do internal medicine, family practice, pediatrics. You can go into surgical fields, whether it's general surgery, neurosurgery, ENT, you name it, and orthopedics. You could go into medical specialties, obviously cardiology, oncology, and nephrology. So there's a wide variety of fields you can choose depending on your area of interest. So just a summary of the steps. Like I said, obviously you have to do your undergrad education with a focus on prerequisites for the medical school. You take the MCAT examination. The medical school application comes next. And after that, you have to take step 1 and 2 of USMLE, and then you apply for a residency program. After residency, then you take the step 3 of USMLE, and you can do fellowship if you intend to. Now, most physicians have to apply for what we call board certification, in their respective area of specialty, and then you get a state license, and then you apply for a job. So that's the path to being a physician. So thank you, I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Bonsall. So next up we have Dr. Mike Swan. He's a dermatologist. He owns and operates Swan Dermatology here in Springfield. So he's been trained to detect and remove skin cancers and trained to non-invasively manipulate various tissues towards functional and cosmetic endpoints. So I'll hand it over to him.
Appreciate it. This one? I don't have a slide. That was really good. If I want to go to medical school, I'm just going to tell you like my story or path and how I chose what I wanted to do. When I finished, I went to Horseman. I don't know if there are any Eagles here. Any Eagles? No? Probably not at Central, but I grew up in Parkcrest. I grew up in Springfield. My mom and I graduated college together. I was the youngest of 3. My dad was in the military, parents were divorced, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. When I was in high school and college, I went to Missouri State. We didn't have a lot, and I got a decent scholarship as a good student. And I was in a band for 2 years and played music and had a great time. I was an okay student and didn't take a lot of hard classes. And then I got a job at Mercy in the emergency room, stocking shelves because they were paying $15 an hour. And I was pretty much doing manual labor before that because it paid well. And anyway, I was like, this is amazing. And I learned in the ER from the guys at Mercy that if you knew enough to be helpful, then you could be helpful. And if you didn't know enough to be helpful, then you were kind of useless. And I thought that was the coolest thing about being a part of a team in medicine. And it really gave me a spark to say, I want to be a doctor, or I at least want to be a part of the healthcare. So I made an appointment. I said, I'm going to change my major to biology, as the pre-meds were at the time. And anyway, so I went and met with this guy that was the head of immunology, Richard Meyer. Really nice guy. But he wasn't particularly that nice to me because I was a sophomore with not good grades and was probably not known for much more than playing music on campus. And he was like, Mike, you're a really nice guy, but there's a line around the door and down the block of people who wanted to get to med school, and they started that line when you were 16, not 20. And so you're too late. And then he said, you should think about doing podiatry. Or, he gave me a lot of like nice, he's like, you should think about feet. And I was like, I'm not really a foot guy. And he was like, you should think about doing like optometry. And I was like, that's pretty cool, but glasses, left, right, which one's better? I was like, I don't know, I'd be a part of this medical team. I love the team. So anyway, I decided to switch majors. They said, get in the pre-med society. And I was working myself through college. And the pre-med society was always when I would work. And so I wasn't able to make it. And the people in the pre-med society were like, yeah, that's no good. You have to be a part of our club. And it kind of came back to bite me because when I applied to medical school, I worked really hard to kind of get straight A's ever since I decided to apply. Took all the hard classes and changed my major and everything. When I went to apply, the pre-med society was like, hey, we can't write you a letter of recommendation because you weren't really a part of the things that we asked you pre-med students to be a part of. I thought there's no way I'm going to get in. I have decent grades because I started, basically wanting to play music. And but the end of the grades were really good and stuff. But I did get in. I got into a couple places, and it kind of frankly shocked me a little bit. But I got into the University of Oklahoma and the University of Missouri, and I was really excited to kind of get out of state after growing up in Springfield and going to Missouri State where my mom worked. So I went to University of Oklahoma and just decided, hey, I finally got in. This is something I always wanted to do. And so I'm going to do whatever is the hardest thing, or the most the most doctorish thing I'm just going to do. So after my freshman year, I did a freshman research project with some cardiologists and cardiothoracic surgeons, and I did dog surgery for the summer. It sounds brutal. We had 2 Pointer labs, and literally I was operating on the hearts of Pointer labs that summer, and it was really interesting work though. I was probably 23, and I couldn't believe that somebody would even let me do this stuff. But it was meaningful work, and what we were doing was we were basically putting devices in animals that had been not tested in humans yet, and it led to the NSYNC trial that came out later. The biventricular pacing, basically synchronized heart pacing for making patients with heart failure or that weren't, their hearts weren't beating correctly, more efficient. Anyway, it was really cool stuff, and at the end of that summer, that project was put up for an NIH grant, and the University of Oklahoma got a ton of money, not all because of me, but it was just a small part, a small cog in the machine that became this big NIH project. When a university gets a big project like from the NIH and a bunch of money comes in, they slay it and they say, over the next 5 years, we're going to give you this many, literally millions and millions of dollars over this many years. And so you have to have everything dialed in. This is the number of people we're going to hire. This is the way we're going to use the money over these many years. So they asked me to stay on for a year, to take a year off medical school and to be a part of the project. And I was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to take time off medical school. And they were like, well, we're going to pay you to do it. And I was like, I don't know that I'm really, want to take another year off. It's already a really long track. And they basically convinced me. They said, no, you're going to, you should, and you're going to have all this great surgical and research experience, and you're going to be able to get a PhD and it's going to take 2 years. And I was like, that's pretty good. That's kind of efficient. I like the idea that. Anyway, after a year, I spent a summer in Italy doing some more of that research in surgery, and it came back. And after another year away from medical school, I decided that I not only was going to go back to medical school, but I really think I was kind of burned out on cardiology. I spent all that time doing it. Got a master's in electrophysiology, not a PhD, and was on maybe 25 papers that were published over the next 3 or 4 years. I ended up deciding to do dermatology of all things, and people are like, "Wow, that's kind of a sellout thing. Now you're doing like pimples." But really what I do is surgery all day. So Will said, this is Mike Swan, he's a dermatologist, and it's funny, but at my office, if you call and you say, hey, we have a rash, is there any way you can see it? And I generally joke and say, there's not a dermatologist here. I mean, that's not what I do. I do surgery on people's faces for skin cancer, reconstructive surgery, and then we have a bunch of technology in the office where we do even cosmetic, but medical endpoints to use technology to kind of change things. And the cool thing about all the STEM stuff is technology is changing at such a rapid pace that whether it's medicine or pharma or engineering, the tech, the rate of change per, call it decade or amount of time, is changing so much more rapidly every 10 years, 10 years ago, if you think about back to, you guys can't think you're too young, to the 70s, people were on, when I was a kid and you wanted to make a phone call, you took a corded phone into your room and you hoped it was long enough and you shut the door, Some parents here are like, yeah, I remember that. The rate of change in a decade now is happening in 6 months. And some of it we just don't know, and the next rate of change with things because of artificial intelligence and things, it's gonna be quicker. It's gonna affect every single specialty, whether you're in STEM or not. And so anyway, getting back to what I did, I decided to do dermatology, and very much like was just explained, finished high in my class, took the USMLE, got lucky enough to get in. I went to the University of Missouri. I spent 4 years there, 1 year as an internist, or my internship year, I should say, and then 3 years of dermatology. I applied because really I didn't want to do dermatology, I wanted to do surgery. I applied and did a fellowship at Scripps Clinic in La Jolla. If any of you are golf fans, it's on the 9th hole of Torrey Mines, beautiful facility on the ocean. I spent 2 years there, one doing a Mohs surgery fellowship where we cut cancers off of people's faces, particularly the nose, eyelids, the high-end real estate, and reconstruct them, put them back together using flaps and grafts and kind of tissue transfer techniques to make people look and work well. So your eye's not pulled off, your eyelid's not pulled off your eye, your nose is breathable and looks nice. And then I did a year of cosmetic surgery, not really to do what you typically think of as cosmetic surgery, like building people's parts, as much as I was doing laser and cosmetic dermatology, which is to explain it in short, is to using a principle called selective photothermolysis. It's basically like when we look at a red sign and it's red, the reason that it's red is because the white light that has all the wavelengths in it is hitting it, and the chromophore that is in that's making it red is absorbing something and reflecting something. And what it's reflecting to all of us is some wavelengths that tell us that's red. Okay? And we all agree that it's red. Well, this principle of photothermolysis is basically like if we use the other colors in high energy and intensity in a laser, we can, and we put it in this room, all the red will melt and nothing else will really see it. So it's like a selective principle of color, and it's how you can blow up things in the heart channels. You can, so how I actually initially got into it was in my cardiology research, but you can target water that way, or you can target colors, you can target collagen that way, you can target cartilage, all these different things. So it's kind of interesting, but I do that in my office too. I finished a fellowship in La Jolla and worked there and lived in Del Mar on the coast, and when I decided to move back to Missouri, all my parents thought I had probably lost my medical license, because why would you go to a flyover state after you've been on the coast for a long time? But I absolutely love living in Missouri and Springfield. Have started my practice 14 years ago, and now we have 40 staff and a couple locations, and it's really, really rewarding. The thing that I love about my job, there's so many opportunities in medicine, and I could have probably honestly done 20 of them and been very happy. There's certain ones I just, you don't want to end up doing out of personal preference, but the thing that I love is I'm able to, with my job, build a team of people who are experts in a narrow field. Like certain people on my team are very good at one or two things and not broad. I'm kind of the teacher that is teaching all these people to be very good at a specific thing. And just like back to the ER, when I kind of learned if you're knowledgeable and you know your stuff, you'll be able to be helpful. And in the end, that's the rewarding thing about medicine is patients are very, very appreciative. Most of my days are all really, really good days. And, you know, we work hard, and the pay is well, although I think it's always not well enough, but, you know, I think no matter what you do, hopefully you think you're underpaid a little bit because you value yourself. So anyway, if anyone has questions, or we're taking them at the end, I guess. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Swan. So next up, we have Dr. Jennifer Essner. She's a general pediatrician at Cox and spends most of her time in the clinic and outpatient setting while also taking care of newborns in the hospital nursery. So I'll pass it over to her.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll give my background first. I'd like to start by saying back in the 90s, early 90s, I went to a high school that had IB. It's called Lee Summit. It was up outside of Kansas City. Nobody ever heard of IB, but I got my IB diploma, and I promise you, you'll be glad any of those that are doing that. It'll make college and the rest of your life, you know, I think easier from working hard. So after high school, I went to Georgetown University. It's in DC. I kind of thought I might want to do medicine, but I really just liked science, and so I had done chemistry, IB chemistry, so I majored in chemistry and got my BS in chemistry, but during that time, I also almost was not on the pre-med group because I found out last minute you were supposed to be in this pre-med group to get the letter that recommended you to medical schools, but I figured out about it in time, so I got the letter of recommendation. I had a dilemma about where to go to medical school because I was engaged to someone who had to serve in the Navy, did ROTC. So I came back to my home state and went to University of Missouri while he figured out if he was going to make it through SEAL training, and it was very complicated. So uniquely, I transferred medical schools, which is not really common. So I did 1 year at Mizzou, got married, he got stationed in Virginia, and so then I actually transferred to Eastern Virginia Medical School. So I got to experience 2 different medical schools. They were very different actually, but both wonderful. And then the next decision you make is, what do I want to specialize in? So I did not want to do surgery, and I either had interest in internal medicine or pediatrics. I thought family medicine was too broad. I didn't think I could ever take care of babies through, 95-year-olds. But at the end of the day, I thought, I just love kids. I think it'll be more fun if I hang out with kids all day instead of older people. So I did pediatrics residency. For that, I went to Washington, D.C. again. It's called Children's National Medical Center. And general pediatrics is a 3-year residency. You pass your boards, become board certified, and get a job. So I worked in D.C. briefly, then moved overseas for my husband's job. And long story short, I ended back in Springfield in 2009. And that's when I got a job with Cox. And I've always practiced in either Nixa or Ozark since '09. And it is a great, rewarding job. I'll go through a typical day. I am mostly clinic-based. So most days I'm there. I see about 20 patients or so. I do inpatient rounds in the newborn nursery at Cox South. But my call group, we each take a day. So I actually do it every Friday. For 14 years, I've rounded every Friday at Cox South. And then we take call. So I'm in a call group of 8 people, which is great because it means I only have to work every 8th weekend. And I'm on call like every other Monday night. And our call is a lot of home-based call. You might get a call from the ER about a kid. They want to make sure you agree with what they're going to do and they're going to send them home. You might get a call from the newborn nursery about a baby that's breathing too fast, and what are you going to do about it? You might get a call from a pharmacy about something, silly. So it's just a gamut of things. But most of your calls from home, and then we round, like on a weekend, I'd go in on Saturday and Sunday to see the babies in my call group. Let's see. I would say it's just busy. I think healthcare right now, talking about the demand, it's just really busy, and that's good and bad. The best part of the job, I think, is the people. I've done it long enough that a lot of my patients' moms, I feel like, are friends of mine, and I've watched kids grow up. You guys have all probably gone to your pediatrician, but it's just, it's great people, then you get to know them over the years. I'd say the worst part, and I'm in primary care is kind of the lower rung of healthcare. We're kind of the entry point. There's just a lot of other stuff besides taking care of patients. There's forms to fill out. There's orders to sign off on, refills, school notes. During COVID, there were so many school notes. So that's kind of, you know, those days sometimes you're like, gosh, I worked really hard and I sign off on a lot of school notes, but it's just part of the job. Trying to think if I had anything else to say. Well, one nice thing, you may have noticed that University of Missouri Medical School has a Springfield campus. You may see it's right by Mercy on South National. And so one thing that's been nice, I get to precept third-year medical students. So when they're doing their pediatrics rotation, they have some clinic time, and I get to work with medical students, which is fun to do a little bit of teaching. And I think that's all I had to say. I'm happy to take questions at the end.
Thank you, Dr. Esselman. So our last panelist is Dr. Chris Taylor. He is a data scientist for American National. He takes data and finds patterns within it to apply machine learning. To apply machine learning, artificial intelligence, or other algorithms. Using those patterns, he creates test stories about the world. So I'll hand it over to him.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this thing. Yeah, okay, there we go. This is the right distance. First, can I ask a question? This is yes. All right, cool. Can I come closer? Is that okay? All right, awesome. Thank you. Cool. So I'm a data scientist. Okay, maybe that was a no. I take large collections of data and I find patterns in it. And I predict the future. Or I tell you stuff about the past that you didn't know. In theory, you're the best you there has ever been. All right, I will figure this out eventually because I'm a data scientist. And I'm collecting data. In theory, you're the best you there's ever been. But what if I could find things out about you that you don't know? I can figure things out about you that you don't know about yourself. Like the next thing you're gonna buy on Amazon. Because that's what they do. People like me, data scientists, predict your shopping habits. We figure out what you're gonna buy and when. There's some fantastic stories within data science. One of my favorites is a young woman started getting ads, and her father was seeing that she was getting ads for newborn stuff, things for babies. He was like, what's going on? This is ridiculous. And then she finally had to admit to him, yeah, I'm pregnant. Because the data scientist and his algorithms had already figured that out before her parents knew. And we're sending her ads for prenatal care and things like that. In 2001, I stood in front of my students at KU and I said, okay, you are going to do everything you can do on your laptop computer anywhere. And you're going to do it on your phone. And all they had at the time were little flip phones where they could kind of text, sort of, but even that you had to like hit the 2 multiple times to get the different characters because there was no keypad. And they're looking at me like I'm insane, like, no, trust me, it's coming. There's real 3D television. You just haven't seen it yet, and we don't film anything in 3D. But it exists. It's in a closet in KU. My background, I grew up raising sheep. I'm an ex-shepherd. I probably still smell like wool, which is nasty, by the way. But I decided that wasn't the life that I wanted. I wanted to do something that didn't involve sheep. So I went to university I really have a love-hate relationship with this microphone. I went to what was then Southwest Missouri State University. You now know it as Missouri State. So I did my undergrad here in Springfield, majored in computer science, minored in physics because apparently I love math. I like to start conversations by going, hi, I'm Chris, I'm a mathematician. And then nobody says anything to me. All right, I'll keep trying, sorry. Thank you. So after a while doing software development, working as a code monkey, I decided that there's got to be more to life. And so I went to the University of Kansas. I got a master's and a PhD in computer science. I learned all about artificial intelligence, how to interrogate data, and just do fascinating things with the world. Now I work for an insurance company, so I feel like that kind of makes me like part of the enemy or something. But I predict wildfires in California. I can figure out, I help our business run more efficiently, and I help people make more intelligent, better informed decisions than what they would be able to make on their own. And what's bizarre, and I was talking about this earlier, is a data scientist can look at data and seem like he knows what he's talking about, as if he's an expert, as if he studied the same things you have, and not know a thing about what he's talking about. So I can take a collection of data about cancer patients and start making predictions about who will have a recurrence of cancer based on data. I don't know anything about medicine. You do not want medical advice from me. But I can tell you what the data says. And quite often the data is as much of an expert about what's going on as you are. And people like me go through it and we start finding those stories and pulling them out and saying, hey, you might not know this. Well, you do know this, you just don't know that you know. It's a fascinating field to work in. And if there's two skill sets I think you absolutely need to have, especially in STEM. One, you need to be curious. You need to want to understand things or know more about it. You find things interesting and you want to chase that and you want to learn more about it. The second, get good at this. Learn how to talk to nerds and then interpret what they're saying to normal people. If you can do that, you can have a job pretty much anywhere. To be able to take the things that crazy people like me say and explain it to somebody else. I was tracking the number of times I will ask, did that make sense to anybody other than me? And I always appreciate when people are like, yeah, I got it. So the last thing I want to leave you with before we get to our question and answer is picture in your mind a tree limb. And on this tree limb, you can see 5 little tree frogs. Let's say 3 of those frogs decide to jump off. How many frogs are left? This is the audience participation portion of the show. 5. Because there's a huge difference between deciding to jump and actually jumping. And the difference between me and my colleagues and so much of the other people is we've actually jumped. And that's what I want to be here to encourage you to do, is to actually jump. Don't just think about it. Thank you so much for your time and attention tonight. We're going to get to questions. But I can't thank you enough for the invitation to be here and just how well you have paid attention and how welcome you have made us feel. Thank you.
Can everybody just give our panelists a round of applause? So we're gonna move into the Q&A session. So does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Brett.
This is kind of a question about engineering, but what's the process like to get your certifications to do stuff with electrical engineering or any field of engineering?
Sure. Microphone's on. I can hear it, so that's good. So engineering, for your professional license, kind of depends on what you do. So electrical engineering, you really only need a professional license if you're building buildings or building buildings or working in power systems or designing things that you could get sued over. Those are the basics. Certain states you need it, so Illinois, Oregon, there's a few others. But to get it, the right way to get it, the easiest way to get it is there's a test in engineering school called, used to be the Fundamental Engineering Exam, FE, but you take that basically when you're done as an undergrad. It used to be every engineering discipline took the same basic test, and then afterwards they've switched it to where they're specific. And then you work under a professional licensed engineer for, I want to say it's 4 years, but it varies. And then you get to take another professional engineering test, and that one's really hard, and it sucks. Certain disciplines in engineering need the PE, so if you're in civil engineering or some of the other fields, you definitely want a professional engineering license. But if you're not in a field that you have to do a print and you have to put an engineering stamp on, it's generally not used. So like GM might only have like a dozen or so PEs. They might employ several thousand engineers, if that makes sense.
Any other questions?
What's the highest math class you would recommend for high school to go into engineering?
Well, definitely take calculus. Take everything up to Diff EQ. You don't want to take Diff EQ in high school. It's much better in college because it'll be more relevant. Data scientists might have more information there.
Also, while being in college, for Missouri State, if you plan on going to Missouri State, they automatically start you off in pre-calc 2. And so if you do get to at least that, that is something that you can start from there.
Yeah, just to reiterate, take as much math as you possibly can. Get to calculus. Even if you're doing a repeat of calculus in your first semester, that's okay. That's what I did, and I found that my first semester of calculus in college was a cakewalk because I'd already been exposed to it before. The other thing I would toss in there is get a familiarity with probability and statistics and how those work.
Does anybody have any more, or if there are more specific questions like that, you can feel free to ask them during the social time. So does anybody have any broad questions for any of the panelists? Okay, then I think we're going to go ahead and move on. So they're all still free to ask questions and talk. There are cookies and hot chocolate over here if anyone is interested. So yeah, thank you guys for coming. And can we give our panelists one more round of applause?
on.